We have Finance Director Dave Purslin with a presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Tonight, we're presenting the proposed operating budget for fiscal year 2025-26. Next slide, please. The city's budget is our financial plan for delivering services to the community over the next year. City services supported by general revenues, such as property and sales taxes, are budgeted in the general fund. Expenditures for these services, which include police and fire, total $277.8 million for next year. Services supported by user fees, such as plan checking, building inspection, and recreation classes, are budgeted in the development and recreation cost centers. Other services paid from restricted sources, such as grants and fees, are budgeted in special revenue funds. Two of the largest special revenue funds are Human Services and Community Development Block Grant. Finally, capital projects, many of which are paid from restricted sources such as state gas tax and county Measure BB sales tax revenue, are budgeted in capital funds. Expenditures budgeted outside the general fund total $144.8 million. This presentation includes an update on the city's economic and fiscal condition, an overview of the proposed budget, and some projections for the future. Next slide, please. Growth in the national economy is expected to slow as we move into next fiscal year. The imposition of tariffs, particularly those on automobiles and goods from China, are expected to increase prices, reduce consumer and business activity, and lead to a higher level of unemployment. Because these tariffs have been implemented so recently, and with a 90-day pause on most of the retaliatory ones, we have yet to see their impact reflected in the economic data. Until now, the employment situation has remained stable, with the April unemployment rate of 4.2% unchanged from March and consistent with reported levels over the past year. Although dropping slightly over the last year from 3% to the mid-2% range, inflation remains somewhat above the Federal Reserve's target of 2%. With the prospect of an economic slowdown combined with tariff-induced inflation, the Federal Reserve is finding itself caught between its dual mandate to maximize employment and maintain stable prices. While lowering interest rates could prevent a slowdown, it could also lead to much higher inflation. On the other hand, raising interest rates could stabilize prices, but drag the economy into a recession. Further complicating their decision is the evolving nature of the president's trade policy, with the potential for additional pauses, new agreements, or retaliatory actions. As a result, the Federal Reserve has indicated they will likely delay any change in interest rates until they have a better sense of which risks appear to be the most threatening. Meanwhile, consumer confidence has fallen to levels not seen since the onset of the COVID pandemic. To the extent that lower consumer confidence translates into reduced purchasing, a weaker economy could become a self-fulfilling prophecy. The city's revenue forecast assumes that tariffs will reduce sales tax collections and stall growth in business tax and other economically sensitive revenues. Additionally, the forecast assumes that the Federal Reserve's concerns over higher inflation will prompt them to keep interest rates higher and for a longer period than they otherwise would, resulting in a continuation of the weak local real estate market and reduced development activity. Next slide, please. This proposed budget addresses an anticipated slowdown in city revenue growth brought about by the federal government's recent imposition of unusually high tariffs on imported goods. Because our budget is based on the core principle of fiscal sustainability, general fund budgeted expenditures for the coming year have been limited to fit within the projected ongoing resources without the use of the budget uncertainty reserve. After adjusting for the approximately $11.9 million one-time sales tax reduction in fiscal year 24-25, resulting from the state's recovery of prior year overpayments, ongoing general fund resources are projected to increase by just 1.7% in fiscal year 2025-26. Property tax, over half of our general fund revenue, is based on values established on the January 1 lien date. That means that revenues for next fiscal year were determined by the real estate market during calendar year 2024. Under Proposition 13, assessed values of all real property adjust with the California Consumer Price Index, or CCPI, with a 2% limit, unless there's a change in ownership or new construction. The CCPI adjustment for next year's tax roll is an increase of 2%. As I mentioned earlier, high interest rates have been significantly reducing the number of property sales. So based on property transfer tax data and preliminary information from the county assessor, the estimated additional increase in value from changes in ownership is only 2.5%. A further estimated increase of 0.25% for the value of new construction reflects the declining level of development activity in Warm Springs and other areas of the city. The forecast for fiscal year 26-27 and the following year assumes slightly lower growth, reflecting initial observations from the county assessor and property transfer tax data from the first quarter of 2025. Sales tax revenues make up almost a quarter of general fund revenue and are estimated to total $56.6 million in fiscal year 2024-25, increasing to $65.5 million in 25-26. The fiscal year 23-24 and 24-25 amounts shown on the slide include the state's recovery of sales tax revenue it over-allocated to the city, as well as the associated reduction of county-wide pool revenue. Adjusting for the state's sales tax recovery, the underlying annual growth during the first two quarters of fiscal year 24-25 was over 3%. However, the President's imposition of tariffs in early 2025, along with implementation delays and retaliatory tariffs by other trading partners, has led to a significant drop in consumer confidence and business investment. Although little data is yet available, it appears that a surge in purchases at pre-tariff prices will be followed by a drop in consumer and business activity. Consequently, the fiscal year 2025-26 revenue estimate reflects a 4.4% decline from the adjusted prior year level. Following that expected tariff-related drop, our projections assume that consumers and businesses will adjust their purchasing behavior and annual growth of 3% will resume over the remainder of the forecast period. Business taxes are projected to yield $13.4 million in fiscal year 24-25, a slight increase from the prior year. The fiscal year 25-26 business tax estimate of $13.4 million assumes no growth based on the expected slowdown in business activity and continued high interest rates discouraging new development. Since business tax is paid based on prior calendar year activity, no growth is forecast until fiscal year 27-28, when the assumed increase is projected at the 10-year average of 4%. Franchise fees are expected to grow modestly over the next several years, with stronger performance from the city's solid waste and utility fees offset by the continuing decline in the cable television franchise. Hotel tax revenue is projected to total $6.1 million in 25-26, an increase of less than 1% from the prior year. After strong post-pandemic growth, occupancy rates and room rates appear to have plateaued over the last several years, and the expected slowdown in business activity suggests little support for increased business travel. Charges for services revenue is increasing in fiscal year 2025-26 to incorporate the anticipated addition of a new fire inspection fee. Overall, this category is expected to remain stable over the forecast horizon. The other category for fiscal year 23-24 includes federal reimbursements of $1.5 million to compensate the city for emergency expenditures during the COVID pandemic and costs of repairing 2023 winter storm damage. Although we anticipate receiving additional reimbursements in the future, the amounts and timing are uncertain, so they are not included in the forecast. Finally, I'll highlight the transfers in category for fiscal year 23-24 includes the City Council's mid-year action to supplement the budget uncertainty reserve with $10 million from the accrued leave liquidation reserve. Adjusting for the state's sales tax recovery during the first quarter of fiscal year 24-25, I'll say again, our ongoing revenues are projected to increase by about 1.7% next year. Next slide, please. The revenues and transfers in shown on this slide are consistent with what was shown on the previous slide. General fund budget development begins in January with the preparation of a base budget that assumes the current year staffing configuration, removes any one-time expenditures, then adds in adjustments for contractual obligations and debt service requirements. The base budget also incorporates pension and retiree health care contributions projected by our CalPERS and consulting actuaries, and includes additional unfunded pension liability contributions per council policy. Finally, we estimate a level of citywide savings for the year based on our historical experience and current and projected vacancies. Because the city's labor agreements expire on June 30, 2025, no compensation increases have been assumed in any of the future year projections. The ongoing difference between our revenue projections and the base budget defines our fiscal capacity for enhancing or expanding services. As the city anticipates a slowdown in revenue during fiscal year 25-26, the proposed budget eliminates general fund support for pavement maintenance and routine tree trimming, and reduces funding for park and street median capital replacement. General fund service enhancements included in the proposed budget are self-supporting. 2 additional fee-supported fire inspectors to implement a state-mandated defensible space inspection program to reduce wildfire risks, and the replacement of multiple part-time staff with 1 full-time office specialist at the animal shelter to improve customer service. Outside the general fund, proposed enhancements include an additional day of homeless encampment cleanup services each week, continuation of the Keep Fremont Housed rental assistance program for homelessness prevention, funding for the winter relief program that provides temporary housing for homeless residents, and an increase to full-time staffing for the assistant chef position at the Lake Elizabeth Agewell Center. General fund budgeted resources in the coming year are estimated to be adequate to support total budgeted expenditures of $277.8 million. I'm going to highlight again that our labor agreements end in June, so no compensation increases have been included in the fiscal year 2025-26 or forecast year expenditures. Even so, the $14.1 million of unreserved fund balance you see at the end of the forecast period equates to just under 1.5% of the proposed and projected expenditures over the 3-year horizon, and helps protect us from the unusually high level of uncertainty in both our current revenue and expenditure projections. As part of the fiscal year 2024-25 year-end report in the fall, staff could recommend allocating a portion of any unreserved fund balance for one-time priority projects or programs, unfunded liabilities, or reserve augmentation. Next slide, please. The proposed budget maintains the general fund contingency reserve at 16.7% of budgeted expenditures and transfers out, or $46.4 million, a level consistent with City Council policy and the recommended practice of the Government Finance Officers Association. To avoid the service disruptions that would result from temporary revenue shortfalls or expenditure spikes, the city has established a general fund budget uncertainty reserve, which acts as a kind of fiscal shock absorber. During fiscal year 2024-25, the state recovered the remaining half of the sales tax it overpaid the city during fiscal year 22-23. As contemplated in the fiscal year 24-25 adopted budget, the general fund budget uncertainty reserve was used to offset that recovery and maintain the current level of services to the community. Staff project that the budget uncertainty reserve will be drawn down from its fiscal year 24-25 starting balance of $24.2 million to $6.7 million by the end of this fiscal year, and will be available to address unanticipated revenue shortfalls or expenditure increases next year. Next slide, please. The majority of our general fund proposed expenditures target the community's three main priorities, including overhead costs. Police, fire, and maintenance make up about 94% of general fund expenditures. The other category shown on the slide includes support for human services activities, debt service payments on the city's bonds, and general fund contributions to community development, affordable housing and homeless services, social service grants, and capital projects. Next slide, please. Although the focus of the presentation so far has been on the general fund, I'd like to highlight some of the major non-general fund operations, including the Development and Recreation Cost Centers and the Human Services Special Revenue Fund. As I mentioned earlier, Development and Recreation Cost Center activities are largely supported by user fees, and the Human Services Fund is supported by a combination of grants and fees for service. In the Development Cost Center, community development staff will be working on a number of projects in 2025-26, including working with Ava Community Energy to transition the default electricity service plan for residential customers to its 100% renewable plan, creating videos to help the public search and apply for affordable housing, creating a kiosk center to facilitate the public's use of online services, and expanding virtual appointment-based plan review to include revisions to issued permits. Staff will also be implementing the Water Quality Improvement Program at Lake Elizabeth to improve the lake's resilience to extreme heat events. Public Works and Community Services staff will continue ongoing projects to deliver the new Central Park Community Center and replace or upgrade park restrooms. Other projects include installation of EV charging infrastructure to support fleet electrification, implementation of the city's active transportation plan, and further expansion of the traffic signal modernization program to coordinate signal timing on Fremont Boulevard, Automall Parkway, and other arterial corridors. The Recreation Cost Center will develop a marketing plan in accordance with the city's Parks and Recreation Master Plan. Ongoing offerings include classes, rental facilities, and recreation opportunities at the city's parks, community centers, and the Aqua Adventures Water Park. Human Services staff will be pursuing the city's homeless response plan through the Keep Fremont Housed Homeless Prevention Program, coordinating operations at the Homeless Navigation Center, collaborating with faith-based hosts to provide safe parking sites, and operating the Winter Relief Program. Staff will also be offering meals, classes, and support services at the city's two age well centers, managing the Rent Review Board, and administering the Ride On Tri-City subsidized transportation program for older adults and individuals with disabilities. The Fremont Family Resource Center will continue to provide a wide variety of services to youth, families, and seniors, including the Spark Point financial coaching and VITA tax preparation programs. Next slide, please. The first column on the staffing table shows our current staffing levels and reflects changes made since the fiscal year 24-25 budget was adopted. Notably, the city eliminated almost 20 vacant full-time equivalent positions during the current year, most of them reductions in the Community Development Department to respond to the reduced level of new development activity we've been experiencing. The only positions added were 2 grant-funded crime and intelligence analysts to staff the police department's real-time information center. The second and third columns show next year's proposed staffing levels and the staffing changes by department. As you can see, the proposed budget would add just over 3 new positions citywide. The proposed additions in the general fund include 2 fee-supported fire inspectors to implement a state-mandated wildland fire risk reduction program, and the addition of a full-time office specialist to improve customer service at the Tri-City Animal Shelter. The cost of that full-time position will be offset by the elimination of similar part-time positions. In the Senior Center Cost Center, an existing part-time assistant chef position will be increased to full-time. This will facilitate an increase in revenue-generating food service activities and create operational efficiencies. At 4.3 positions per 1,000 residents, Fremont remains near the low end of per capita staffing compared with our neighboring cities. Next slide, please. To summarize, we anticipate that growth in the national economy will slow as tariffs increase prices and reduce business activity. Challenged by its dual mandate to maximize employment and stabilize prices, the Federal Reserve will likely keep interest rates higher longer. We expect these factors to reduce our general fund revenues next fiscal year and over the forecast period, and have consequently eliminated general fund support for a portion of our ongoing maintenance and capital replacement activities. Additionally, because the city's labor agreements expire on June 30, 2025, no compensation increases have been included in the proposed budget or assumed in any of the future year projections. Consistent with the City Council's foundational principle of fiscal sustainability, general fund budgeted expenditures for the coming year of $277.8 million have been limited to fit within the projected ongoing resources without the use of the budget uncertainty reserve. Our general fund forecast indicates that our ongoing revenues are sufficient to cover our ongoing expenditures without the use of reserves. However, we face significant uncertainty in both our future revenues and expenditures. Fortunately, the City Council's prudent decisions in past years to adequately fund the budget uncertainty reserve provides us with some operational flexibility. Next slide, please. The first public hearing on the proposed operating budget is scheduled for the City Council meeting on June 3rd, and the second public hearing and budget adoption are scheduled for June 10th. That completes my presentation, and I'll hand the meeting back to the Mayor for City Council questions and discussion.
Thank you, Mr. Purslin. Questions at this time, starting with Councilmember Shao.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you for the presentation. I was looking for the payment that we've been making over the years for the unfunded liability for the city. I couldn't find any of those numbers in this presentation. Are we still doing that?
Absolutely. So as a as just sort of a reminder, the unfunded pension liability as of June 30, 2023, which was the most recent actuarial report, was a little over $500 million, which made us about 68% funded overall. The 2025-26, so that's next fiscal year, actuarially determined contribution is about $60 million. It's a little bit higher than what we're paying in the current fiscal year. The city's required pension contribution includes about $20 million as the normal cost component. That's the present value of benefits earned during the year. And almost $40 million is the amount needed to amortize the unfunded liability. And per the City Council policy, 10% or $4 million is also being added as an additional contribution next fiscal year.
Thank you.
Councilmember Kimberlin.
Thank you, Mayor. Wow, what a presentation and what a printout of 275 pages of information. Thank you. Question would be, what if our federal forecast pretty much changes a little bit every day? What if there was something incredible that happened that the tariffs did not go through and that didn't happen? Would we be able to adjust the budget down the road, have a revision?
Yes. So we'll be presenting the 2024-25 year-end report probably at the beginning of November. If something happened very quickly and we could determine with a great deal of confidence that in fact our revenues were performing much better than we had anticipated, that would be an opportunity for us to make a recommendation to the City Council. More likely, the mid-year budget report at the beginning of March, which would reflect information that we've received generally through the end of December, would be a better opportunity, because at that point I think we'd have more confidence that whatever was going on was in fact really happening and not just a mirage. But if things do go better, we'll have opportunities to adjust the budget. But I would also caution that if things don't go as well as we projected, we would also be returning to council to make recommendations to rebalance the budget as well.
Okay, thank you. Another question would be, the budget uncertainty fund is low because, could you please review that really quickly?
Sure. So the budget uncertainty reserve at the mid-year report in fiscal year 22-23 was at about $7.5 million. At that time, the City Council took an action to increase it to $12.5 million because we were starting to see sales tax increase at a rate that seemed higher than we could really understand. Then, as part of the proposed budget for 23-24, with the sales tax still going up and up and up, the City Council took an additional action to increase the budget uncertainty reserve to $20 million. Then we learned that, in fact, the sales taxes that we had been receiving were a mistake by the state.
Okay.
So we had the City Council take an additional action as part of the mid-year report last fiscal year to increase the budget uncertainty reserve by another $10 million to $30 million. During fiscal year 23-24, a lot of the impact of the state's recovery was absorbed by the $21.9 million unreserved fund balance that the City Council had chosen to leave unallocated. But that wasn't enough to absorb the full impact. So about $5 or $6 million of the $30 million budget uncertainty reserve was drawn down last fiscal year. So we began this fiscal year with $24.2 million. As we planned, because again, we knew that the state was going to be recovering the second half of their overpayment this fiscal year, we used the budget uncertainty reserve to maintain services in the current fiscal year. The alternative would have been to probably wind up cutting services and eliminating positions. So in the current fiscal year right now, we're anticipating that that $24.2 million will be drawn down to an ending balance of about $6.7 million.
Great. Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Zing.
Okay, thank you very much for the presentation. I'm looking at the report of revenue versus expense, and you mentioned that there is a, let me see what's that. On the expense, there is a less citywide saving of $20 million. So the citywide saving is the unfulfilled employee expense, salary plus expense?
So the citywide savings line in the general fund budget is a combination of both personnel and non-personnel savings. Our historical experience over, say, the last 10 years is that we save about 6% of our budgeted expenditures each year. I highlight the word expenditures because I'm not including transfers out. Transfers out are fully within our control. So on average, we save 6% of our budgeted expenditures. In the last couple of years, because we have had particularly high vacancy rates, those citywide savings levels have been higher. So for example, in the current fiscal year, we assume 7.5% expenditure savings for citywide savings. For this next fiscal year, the one that's in the proposed budget, we are anticipating a lower level of vacancies, and so we've reduced the citywide savings assumption to 7%, and that's the $20 million that you're referring to.
Okay, thank you. So I just want to clarify. So it does reflect, as accurate as possible, the current employee numbers, which usually I was heard somewhere that we have a big cushion to save those money under the unfulfilled position, which is not the case because you have already deducted the $20 million based on your best estimate, correct?
That is correct. So as you can see, looking in the general fund proposed budget, you'll see that the citywide savings assumption, that $20 million, is being deducted from total expenditures. So we are using those estimated savings to balance the budget. So they have been used in the proposed budget.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Councilmember Campbell.
Was making some funny noise. That was part of my question. But the other part for the staffing projections piece, we don't include vacant positions in these numbers, do we?
These numbers reflect the authorized staffing. So this is the number of positions that are authorized and budgeted. Vacancies come and go, so we're not trying to deduct those from these numbers. These are the authorized positions.
So how do you handle vacant positions in the budget then? So you have 174 positions in this budget, and you may anticipate that 6 people are going to retire or resign. Where do you budget for that, or do you budget for that?
So we budget for every authorized position, and then we have the citywide savings, one component of which is estimated personnel savings. That's the vacancy savings you're referring to, being deducted from the total budget expenditures.
But it actually goes back in to balance the budget. I just heard you say that too.
That's correct.
That's correct. Okay, and then you have that the general fund budget ongoing is going to be 278.3, and then you have the 277.8 as expenditures. Where does the balance go? Does that go back into the budget as well? Because there is a little bit of a offset there.
Sure. So at the bottom of the table In the budget document, you'll see that there's around $200,000 difference between the projected revenue and the budgeted expenditures. One of the things I would note is that while expenditures are authorized to be spent, the revenue is just an estimate. So we really don't know what we're going to be receiving. So that $200,000 difference is essentially just an estimate of what might be out there by the end of the fiscal year. So we're not doing anything with that. What we will be doing when we come back as part of the year-end report in November for 2024-25 is, to the extent that at that point we will have closed the books for the fiscal year, we will know what our revenues were. And to the extent that we do have any unreserved fund balance remaining, we will make recommendations to the City Council, and you'll have the opportunity to make some sort of disposition for those funds.
Do you start at zero or do you roll over? So if we don't spend everything that we get for the fiscal year, you roll it over to the coming year.
So in some past years where we've been anticipating that we'll end the year with an unreserved fund balance, we have actually on occasion included a portion of that estimated unreserved fund balance as part of the next year's proposed budget. However, because we're not anticipating 24-25 will end with an unreserved fund balance, we are not rolling over anything into 25-26 in the proposed budget.
Okay, thank you so much.
Councilmember King.
Thank you, Mayor. My question was also on the changes that could happen in the at the federal level with the tariff. So, recently we also saw some changes that kind of rolled around with the China, U.S. tariff situation. So, if we, I guess you kind of answered partly, if we see changes that's significant enough to change our position in our forecasting, then when do you expect again that that could change our budget outlook?
So what we are hearing is that it'll probably be a while before we actually see the full impact of the tariffs being reflected in the economic data. Something I mentioned earlier is that a lot of businesses imported inventory in advance of the tariffs to try to beat the tariffs. And there's inventory right now that's being sold at pre-tariff prices. And that will likely last through the end of May or maybe even into June in some cases. So when that pre-tariff inventory runs out, that's when the higher prices are going to hit. That's when we're going to start seeing the real impact of the tariffs, which means that probably the impact won't be apparent until at least after the first quarter of this next fiscal year. So as a reminder, sales tax information is received typically 2 to 3 months after the end of the sales tax quarter. So the first quarter sales tax data that we're receiving for next fiscal year, we won't begin to see those numbers until the end of November or the beginning of December. So that gives you some sense of the timing on what, when we would really see the first indication if in fact things were either better or worse than we're currently projecting. I can guarantee you that whatever happens, it won't be exactly what we're currently projecting because we really don't know what's going to happen. But it will be a while before we really know how things are playing out.
True, thank you. Yeah, because I'm hearing reports that a lot of businesses that had placed future kind of like they would plan orders for like second quarter, third quarter, and then because of the tariff they are canceling future orders, and people with the stock market being so volatile and with people losing money in the stock market, then they're spending less. So, like you said, we're gonna see those a little bit later. Thank you.
Thanks. Does Councilmember Liu have his hand raised or no? Okay, Councilmember Liu.
Right. Thanks. So, I guess my question is also pretty similar based on the, like the whole national level. What my main concern is, we're drawing down from our current budget uncertainty reserve for to supplement the uncertainty that's going on and everything like that. But my question is, like if we do feel the effects of the tariffs and if they go into full effect with a 245% or something like that, won't that also might indicate an actual recession? And if so, what are the plans for that? Because if we're already drawing down the budget uncertainty reserve for and because due to uncertainty of the budget, won't an actual recession also leave us with no with nothing left in the bank account, so to say?
So as I mentioned, we anticipate ending the current fiscal year with about $6.7 million in the budget uncertainty reserve. So that would provide us with at least a little bit of cushion to the extent that our revenue projection turns out to be overly optimistic and we need to do some budget rebalancing next year. So as I mentioned, we would probably come back as part of the mid-year budget report in March to recommend reductions to help us offset the revenue shortfall that we would be experiencing if we really did go into full-blown recession. But again, the budget uncertainty reserve of about $6.7 million ought to be sufficient to help us maintain services while we are figuring out that, in fact, we're in a full-blown recession and not bringing in the amount of revenue that we had anticipated.
Okay. Understood. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
No further questions. Yeah.
Thank you, Councilmember Liu. So just follow up on that, on the federal cuts, besides the tariff and all that, are there any other federal funding that's at risk that is programmed in this budget?
So we do have some federal grant money that we're counting on. I mentioned earlier that one of our largest special revenue funds is our Community Development Block Grant Fund. And we know that there's been some discussion in Congress or the administration of eliminating the community development block grants. So we're definitely at risk, and we are benefiting from certain grant programs in a number of areas: human services, public safety, capital projects. And we also know that the federal government has been, or some folks in the federal government have been talking about cutting off grant funding to the extent that public agencies aren't fully cooperating with the federal administration's immigration policy. So there's all kinds of things that could possibly happen, and so we're looking. I mean, we're definitely keeping our eye on those things.
Thank you. There were some emails about us cutting funding for unhoused programs. Is that true? Because I didn't see that anywhere.
As I mentioned, we are continuing and increasing our general fund contributions to the homeless fund. We are continuing on with Keep Fremont House program, the Winter Shelter program, the Housing Navigation Center. So I'm not aware that we're cutting any homeless programs.
Thank you. So I think we'll turn it over for speakers. Councilmember Zhang, do you have a second bite at the apple?
Yes, I have a quick question, really quick. So when we talk about 6.8 uncertainty funds, but we still have, contingency reserve of 16.7. So at what situation can we use those funds?
So the contingency reserve is really intended to allow the city to help the community in the event of a natural disaster. So if there was a major earthquake, if there was flooding, or as in the case of the 2023 winter storms where infrastructure was damaged, we would use the contingency reserve to support the community. So it's really intended to address a natural disaster as opposed to deal with budget problems.
All
Thank you.
right. Thank you so much. Well, that means we are really running on a very lean budget, 6.7 as a cushion. Thank you.
616. How many speakers?
7.
7. Okay. Let's do a minute and a half each.